Okay, thank you everybody for being here, both in person and online. Apologies again for the technical difficulties we had earlier. Hopefully this one goes a little bit smoother. Won't go through the public meeting guidelines and etiquette today. I think people are aware of that from the previous meeting. So we'll go to the next slide, please. Again, welcome to the Puget Sound Recreational Breakout discussion. Our goal here today is to focus on proposals for the 2026 season. So that we can get modeling inputs to our modeling staff so that we can get that first model run and really kicks off the process of shaping seasons for 2026. Next slide, please. So again, just a quick reminder of our Puget Sound Recreational Fisheries team. My name is Jake Rice, as statewide salmon and steelhead manager. I'm here with Christina Iverson, our Puget Sound salmon manager, and Haley Rosenthal, our Puget Sound recreational support biologist. Next slide, please. Quick agenda today. We'll go have a quick review of the WDFW mission statement and North of Falcon policy. We'll walk through the Chinook management objectives and Coho management objectives as well, followed by recreational considerations, North of Falcon schedule remaining for the year, and we'll move to the Q&A public comment portion. Next slide, please. Often have to remind ourselves that WDFW is a conservation agency, as stated in our mission statement. We strive each year in this North of Falcon process to maximize the available harvest within our conservation and management guidelines. Next slide, please. We'll take some time to read through the Puget Sound Fisheries Objective, our policy. We thought this was important to remind everyone about the guidance from our Fish and Wildlife Commission has given us through this process. The Puget Sound harvest management objectives for Chinook and Coho stocks in priority order are to 1, provide meaningful recreational fishing opportunities, and 2, identify and provide opportunities for commercial harvest. When managing sport fisheries in this region, recreational opportunities will be distributed equitably across fishing areas, considering factors such as the uniqueness of each area, the availability of opportunities for various species in each area throughout the season, the desire to provide high levels of total recreational opportunity, and the biological impacts. For fisheries directed at harvestable Puget Sound origin chum and pink stocks, provide meaningful opportunities of both commercial and recreational fisheries while minimizing gear and other fishery conflicts. In most years, the majority of non-treaty chum harvest will be by commercial fisheries, and the majority of non-treaty pink harvest will be by recreational fisheries. Next slide, please. With that, I will turn it over to Christina Iverson.
Thanks, Jake. So I'm going to walk through just, as Jake mentioned, we do have considerations each year that we need to consider when shaping fisheries. Every season setting cycle, we do start out with a limited number of Chinook impacts. This is what is considered wild fish. That's the currency that we're given under NOAA fisheries. These are limited, and so this can come in the shape of directed impacts or non-retention impacts, but that number is still a limited number. Each marine area, these stocks are affected differently, especially when we are taking a look at how this the FRAM tool shows where stocks are impacted in place and time. So expansions or changes of fisheries can be considered, but they do come at a cost for the expense of another fishery in another area, since these are a fixed number of impacts. And just a reminder, there are currently no mechanisms to update the pre-terminal forecasted abundance estimates for the ocean and for Puget Sound fisheries. This is just kind of a recap of what folks have seen already, what we're looking at for 2026 for forecasts for Puget Sound Chinook. Over on the far right in the orange, that's the forecast. And the darker bars are hatchery origin, and the opaque is the natural origin. So just kind of a snapshot of where we're at looking at across the Chinook for 2026 comparison related to the historic 10-year average. And last year, hatchery is up 60% and natural origin is down 35% compared to the 10-year adult returns. Hatchery is up 16% and natural is up 7% compared to last year's forecast for 2025 Chinook. And then the total is up 40% for Puget Sound Chinook over the 10-year average run size and 15% from last year's forecast. And then looking ahead at the preliminary modeling results, with 2026 abundance and the 2025 fishery package. As we mentioned, the inside fisheries have not been added yet, nor had northern. So just kind of running it, the initial model run here, looking at the exploitation rates under NIMS guidance and the RMP compared to where we would be at for the southern SUS exploitations for each of the management units of Puget Sound Chinook. You'll notice that the Snohomish is bold and underlined. So if looking at the mid-ocean option that we discussed earlier, it puts us above the 8.3 southern SUS at 8.8. Next slide, please. And then just some overall considerations for Puget Sound Chinook for 2026. The hatchery is up 16%, the wild is up 7%, and 2026 proposed inputs will be added to the next round of modeling, as Jake mentioned earlier. Our next model runs, we're looking to likely exceed objectives for several stocks. For Chinook, that would include Nooksack, Spring Chinook, Snohomish, and Stillaguamish. And then expectations for the marine fisheries for Chinook for are similar, expected to be similar for 2026 as they were for 2025. For Coho, again, just a kind of overall recap where we're at relative to the 10-year average for Puget Sound Coho and from last year's forecast. On the far right in the orange, you'll see hatchery is up 45% and natural origin is up 55% from the 10-year average. Hatchery is up 4% and natural origin is up 53% compared to the 2025 forecast. And the total Puget Sound Coho are up 49% from the 10-year run size and 22% from last year's forecast. Looking ahead to the management objectives, these are Ocean Age 3 forecast numbers for the wild management units for Puget Sound Coho. This is comparing that total ER ceiling of SUS to the mid option. And next slide. And again, just kind of a recap of considerations for Coho. The hatchery is up slightly with 4%. The wild is up 53%. Hood Canal Coho is slightly over the 2025 forecast and is still a conservation concern for 2026, given this would be the second year above that low or critical. Skagit Wild Coho is up significantly this year. And Thompson, we're still looking at the 10% ER cap for this year. And I'll hand it over to Haley to talk about the proposals for starting.
Hi, good morning. Can everyone hear me? So here we're looking at marine fishery proposals, and these are showing a strong reflection of what we lost last year in 2025. Internally, we discussed using these proposals as a starting point for a fishery package, but we are here today to discuss additional proposals. So looking at these proposals to first return Area 5 winter Chinook fishery, return Area 6 Chinook quota, increase non-selective coho days in both marine areas 5 and 6, return non-selective coho in Area 7 for all of September, similar coho seasons in 8-1 and 8-2, return non-selective coho in Area 9 in September, and return Hood Canal, which is Area 12, to non-selective coho. And most of these marine areas have similar seasons proposed, but we do expect Chinook to be more restrictive. Now moving ahead, these are additional fishing opportunities, and we realize this isn't everything we've heard. These are what the public has proposed, but it does represent what we've heard so far with the greatest angler support. And so these include extending the Bellingham Bay fishery for the first part of August, increasing quota in marine areas 7, 9, 10, and 11 for Chinook, adding Chinook non-retention impacts in marine area 9 in July for a coho-directed fishery when Chinook is not open, a Marine Area 9 Coho Beach Fishery in July, October Coho Opportunity in both Marine Areas 7 and 9, a Lake Washington Labor Day Fishery, chum retention through November 30th for Marine Areas 10 and 11. Right now it goes through November 15th. And then to consider alternative schedules for summer openings. Next slide, please. So now diving into our freshwater fishery considerations. Many rivers should experience similar opportunity as 2025, although we won't be fishing on pinks this year. There may, or because of the lack of snowpack, low flows, and warm temperatures, these all might affect some of our opportunity in the freshwater fisheries. For Snohomish and Skykomish, we are seeing a continued poor stock performance from this summer fall Chinook, and this will likely affect our season outcomes. And then on the Quilcene, there is a major habitat restoration project in river, and so access will be limited in 2026. And here we're showing our North of Falcon meeting schedule again. And just a reminder for next week's evening meetings on the 24th and 26th, they are virtual, so make sure you pre-register online. And here are all of the links for upcoming meetings, our forecasts and model runs, and then we will have the proposed seasons for marine and freshwater fisheries posted online later this week. And then also a link for your public input.
With that being said, we'll start to transition over to the Q&A session. Just a reminder today that the focus of the meeting is on proposals for fishing seasons for 2026, so we can get that model updated. We've got a lot of work still today, work with our modeling staff to make sure that first model goes in, and then continue to work on building the modeling tools that we've had in previous years that people have asked about. Once we get this first model run, hopefully we have those modeling tools up and available that we'll be able to take a lot of these other proposals and put in that people can go through in their own time and kind of look through how those impacts change throughout different schedules, different seasons, and different ideas. So that being said, we will continue to rotate between in-person and online. So we'll open up for questions. Pat, let's see one from you down here.
Thank you, Jake, and the recreational team. I want to first say that I appreciate all the work that you've done in getting ready for modeling and considering proposals from the public. And contributing to that, the advisors from the Puget Sound advisors, the department's advisory group, about 13 people. We've been discussing the proposals. Primarily, we've been focusing on marine fisheries so far to aid the department in negotiating with the tribes to get a first set of model runs to look at realistic fisheries and the conservation effects of those fisheries, and make progress as fast as we can. So thank you for that endeavor. And our contribution to that is a specific set of recommended changes to marine areas 5 through 13. And we've passed that to the department in a specific description array or format that's similar to what's in the list of agreed fisheries. So you have that, and I don't want to go over that, but I would like to touch on the main changes from last year's fishery that we are proposing. So relative to last year, I'll try to get through this rapidly, and here we go. So for areas 5 and 6, we're requesting that we extend the non-selective coho fishery and make sure that we get as much of an opportunity for that within the conservation limits that you've described for either Strait of Juan de Fuca or Thompson Coho, probably. We would like to look at an earlier start for those areas post Labor Day in September and continuing through early October. We'd also like to propose the restoration consistent with what you have proposed for Area 5 to restore that. For some reason, we have a longer history or a longer memory of what has been lost, and it goes back more years than just last year with Area 5. And so we're recommending that you look at the restoration of winter opportunity in areas 5, 6, and 7. And that's important to us in addressing the Commission's policy of fairly distributing the opportunities across those areas with respect to this unique and valuable experience for Puget Sound recreational salmon fisheries. So we want to look at Area 6 extending Coho through October. We want to look at the opportunity for non-selective coho in all of September, which you have recorded already. We again would like to restore that winter opportunity in 7. For 8.1 and 8.2, we do think that it is possible that some extension into October could be possible within the conservation limitations for those local coho, wild coho stocks that appear quite strong this year. For Area 9, we'd also like to extend the non-selective coho through October 15th. We'd also like to look at allowing beach fishery for coho in July when it's not open for marked selective Chinook fishing. For Area 10, we'd like to extend the salmon fishery, actually 10 and 11, the salmon fishing opportunity for sport through the end of November, November 30th. We'd also like to have you restore winter Chinook opportunity and consider something, possibly a unique opportunity to do something in a limited area in Elliott Bay in late December. Kind of along the lines of recalling what a historically and culturally significant fishery the Tengu Derby was. And so it's somewhat like that with restrictions in area and in gear. For Area 11, a very similar fishery to last year, but we would like to see that fishery extended to November 30th as well. For Area 12, a couple of unique and interesting changes that we have been discussing. We do note the loss of opportunity is quite significant with the loss of the Skokomish River opportunity for the last several years. So a couple of recommendations. We don't see the value of selective fishing. We note that you've suggested a non-selective fishery for Chinook in that July through September timeframe. We'd also like to see the area. We're actually curious about why the area around the Skokomish River mouth is closed or was closed last year. And so we'd like to see that considered as open because we need to get at opportunity for the very large and increasing number of hatchery Chinook available. The very low mark rates in that area do suggest that non-selective fisheries can be effective. Area 13, we have no changes to recommend. And in all of these areas, we are endorsing and encouraging you to look at increasing the Chinook encounters with the initial modeling to maximize the access to harvestable fish. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pat. Leah will go online. Nobody online right now. Been here in the front?
Yeah, thank you. I want to echo Pat. We were together many, many times when he was still working for the department, and sometimes on different sides of an issue. But he's a good guy. And on the Hood Canal, I have been talking directly with the Skoke tribe, directly with the chairman of the tribe himself on a number of occasions, trying to get the tribe to relax some of the constraints that have actually denied us opportunity. And that hasn't been successful. My latest is I tried to get the tribe to make it a more reasonable cost for using that ramp at that. So in reality, the tribe has been able to deny us access. And Pat mentioned the one this last year off the shut off, about 10 years ago on the Skoke River, and I led the rally there at the hatchery against that, and have been deeply involved. And Jim Scott can probably fill you in on that if you wanted more detail. But what I'd like to see is the department take another run at doing something, because we without access, you can't really have much of a fishery, and most of us don't have kayaks, and some of us have no business being in a kayak. Yeah, and so I'm asking take another run at what I did. I wrote a letter. Jim Scott has it. The department has it, to the tribal chair, because I developed a personal relationship with him, I thought, and that was to go from an annual fee of $300, and they set a limit on the amount of those. This year they printed 200, and they actually sold, I think, 150. So they are restricting, and it's by design. It's by design. It's not because they can make more money. And so I suggested to them to put in one of these machines like you have here for parking, and use that. Point Defiance has that, and you can charge even up to $35 or $30. But to pay $300 for guys like myself to come all the way over from Tacoma or Bonnie Lake and expect to spend $300 for one or two trips is baloney. And that's been a burr in a saddle. I understand the history and the background. I've had contact with the city of Tacoma, so I'm making a formal request now that you guys, the department at whatever level, take another run and maybe endorse my letter, which does call for just simply lowering the fee so you could have more people that can go over there. And I do have some comments on Baker. I don't know if this is the right time to do that. If I got the mic, I probably should just grab it, right? Baker, I want to compliment the department. And last year, I kind of beat up on the department on that subject. But I thought that the staff, Edward and Mickey and some of the others, did a great job this year. And the fact that they're using the sonar to get a heads up on what's happening as far as those returns. This is the first time we've come very close to being an equity in all the years I've been involved with this. I want to give them that compliment to start with. I think overall they've done a good job this last year. The one area I think needs some attention is the department needs to establish as a matter of policy, what we've been told is that the lake would be open the first Saturday after the 4th. We know from longstanding opposition by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, not Fish and Wildlife, the Forest Service. They don't want to have folks out there fishing for sockeye in that crowd, along with regular folks that just like to go up there on the 4th of July and have a good time. So we've accepted that, even though there's fish in the lake. But we need to be consistent. We can't be getting jerked around one year or the other. Most people put in for those campsite permits immediately after the 1st of January. That's the reality. And to say you're going to wait until the end of North of Falcon before you tell folks when you're going to open is nonsense. It's not necessary, not with the way the runs have been coming in. So there's nothing in the run size that has any bearing on this. It's just a matter of policy, and you know in ahead what the calendar is going to be. So I think we should go be consistent and open it the first Saturday after the 4th. And it was Edward himself who said, we got to go with Saturday because the guys who are the working stiffs are out there, and guys and gals don't get to go in the middle of the week like retired guys like you, Frank. So I think in matter of equity, let's just be consistent. You can put it on your website. You got a special website for Baker, like you do Lake Washington, and you can post it there. But let's be consistent. Let's not be jerking people around. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody online?
Okay, we have a hand up from Tim. Tim, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I'd just like to talk about Baker Lake retention amounts. I don't know if you came out with a proposal yet on the retention, how many fish you're gonna do this year. I know the run's up again. My only concern is last year it was, to lack of a better word, it was crazy out there with the amount of people that have shown up from everywhere because the limit was so high. I would prefer that it goes back down to 4 instead of 6 if we could. I mean, if the fish are there, let's not overfish it. There's no sense in overfishing it. 4 fish a day is fine. And that's the only thing I have to add at this time.
Thank you. Anybody in the room?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Larry Phillips. So as Pat mentioned, I really appreciate the team here. Obviously, every day is a challenge, and we're trying to craft a season that meets our conservation objectives, but offers us the most opportunity we can get. One of the asks I have is that, as the time goes on here, the constraints get tighter, and the sense of urgency to reach an agreement that meets those objectives happens quicker. And, we're likely to be down to the last day here when we make a decision about, our final suite of fisheries. But one thing that potentially gets lost here is, when we make a cut in one area and it frees up opportunity in other areas, I would just ask that we look at every possible, when we turn that dial, fisheries are not equal. Some of our fisheries are much more expensive in terms of constraining stock impacts than others. But when we do make a cut in a certain area, it could free up opportunity. And I hope we can focus on, that as we get closer to the finish line. Again, I don't, this isn't about trying to develop fisheries that don't meet our conservation objectives. We certainly, that's the commitment we all made. But making sure that we're taking every opportunity to get every day we can on the water is really critical to the sport fishing community. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. We're hoping when we get that first model run, we have those modeling tools that we'll be able to have some stuff for the public that we can look at and help us with ideas on how we maximize those opportunities. So thank you.
Okay, our next hand online is Patrick. Patrick, go ahead. Oh, I think I prompted you to unmute as you unmuted yourself, so I muted you, Patrick. I apologize. You can unmute again.
Okay. Just like to thank the staff for doing a good job so far this year. I've been participating in the North of Falcon process. I think this is my 4th year, and every year I learn a little bit more, and I appreciate the staff's efforts. Like to say that the proposed fisheries this year look really good. Always concerned about the constraints related to Chinook, but I understand that the one bright spot is the Stillaguamish has more Chinook modeled to come back, and they've been struggling. So really hoping that that opens up, the fact that comes to fruition opens up some more opportunity for Chinook that has been outlined this year, and I see that hatchery returns are increased, but natural stocks are down a little bit. That's always concerning. However, looking at the totals projected and historically, and when Pat was talking about the recreational advisor's recommendations, I totally support having an increase for Chinook in areas 7, 9, 10, and 11. It wasn't too many years ago, and I remember fishing just before the pandemic. In fact, 2019, the numbers for Chinook for natural stock and hatchery weren't too different from the last 2 years, and we had fantastic fishing in the winter in Area 7, and I would really love to see that return. I don't think it would be that expensive because those of us that can are going just across the border into BC waters and fishing on those same fish that came, and they're a lot of them are clipped and they're returning to Washington. So would really like to see that return. And I would also like to see for coho fishing an extension for non-selective coho in areas 5 and 6. As Pat mentioned, I think what he said was starting Labor Day, right after Labor Day, and going into October. I think that's a wonderful opportunity, and the stocks looks like they're going to support that for coho this year. Also like to see areas 8.1 and 8.2 into October for coho this year. And for area 9, non-selective from 1st of September through October 15th. Would really love to see that. And I really like the idea of enabling people that want to fish off the beach in Area 9, that they can do that starting in July for a coho beach fishery. I think that's wonderful. And I would love to see it happen also in the southern part of 8.2 on Whidbey Island, where that it's the place where you can get herring there and fish off the beach, float, and that's a lot of people really enjoy that. So I think that would be a wonderful addition to coho fishing there. So anyway, it looks like there's a lot of great opportunities this year, and I'll be participating in all the other meetings online and also in person at Linwood. So again, thank you for letting us participate and listening to our suggestions.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Looks like Carl, your hand's up.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Carl Nyman. I've been operating fishing charters in Puget Sound since 1994 and participating in the North of Falcon process for, say, 25 years. And, I want to show appreciation for the department and for the tribes for getting back on schedule this year. The last couple of years have been a real drag, really behind schedule and not able to really provide meaningful testimony and get fisheries into the FRAM model on schedule. And so this is refreshing. I want to give a shout out to Puget Sound for bouncing back on the crab fishery in Area 10, and to the shellfish managers of the Department of Fish and Wildlife for, if you could get a message out to them for managing that fishery responsibly and providing a valuable winter crab fishery in Marine Area 10. this last winter, it gave the charters something to do since we've lost our winter blackmouth fishery, which we really should find a way to have a catch and release fishery in the winter someday. These closures, there should be a way to incorporate some catch and release fishing for winter Chinook, even with gear restrictions, whatever is needed. Catch and release fishing is a staple for conservation nationally, and it's the most conservative fishing that can be conducted. So I think that should always be on our radar, and it's going to provide value to the charter industry to have catch and release fishing in the winter if we can get there someday. So I wanted to comment a little bit on the ability for us to conduct. I noticed one of the bullet points on the board was looking at a different schedule for our summer Chinook fishery. So one of my questions will be to the department, how is that looking with discussions with the co-managers? Have you discussed it? What does the model spit out as far as, have you modeled that yet? And what is it spitting out as far as encounter rates? What's the possibility of looking at a 7-day-a-week opener in areas 10 and 11? One of the issues I see, and I want to remind the public that when we run this initial FRAM run with this year's abundance and last year's seasons, the only seasons that are last year's seasons are the non-tribal seasons. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but generally this NALF run includes more historical tribal fisheries that do not reflect last year's seasons, are inflated back up to more historical seasons. And to me, that's a little bit of smoke and mirrors. You show these numbers that show, okay, we're already over on Snohomish Chinook. To me, that's just a touch of smoke and mirrors. The public sees this and goes, oh crap, we don't have any room to increase any fisheries, even though we have this increased abundance of hatchery fish, because we're already going over on stocks of concern. But we're modeling fisheries that are actually increased over last year, even though the recreational fisheries are the same as last year.
Okay, I have a hand online from Tony. Tony, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Hold on a second, Tony. I apologize. I misread the room. Just a second.
So let me get a couple questions there, Carl. So we are working with the modeling team on getting those initial model inputs. To the degree I think you're asking for schedule changes, this is what part of this meeting is to help line out better. And the proposal that was sent from the advisors yesterday helps with that. We have not had any of those conversations with the co-managers yet. That begins tomorrow and will go into the coming weeks as we start to talk about those different inputs and stuff. Did I miss any other questions?
Also, some of the different scheduling that you're asking for are more management decisions and not modeled in FRAM differently.
Well, I did mention that, the NALF run that we're currently looking at, and we're modeling this year's abundance with last year's fisheries. Does that include all of last year's fisheries for recreational, tribal, commercial, non-tribal, and tribal fisheries, or does it include more historical tribal fisheries?
Last year's fisheries.
Of the actual tribal fisheries that were conducted last year?
My understanding is last year's fisheries.
So you haven't modeled an increased winter troll fishery for the macaw yet?
We have done no modeling yet. I'm sorry if we weren't clear about that earlier.
Okay.
Okay, sorry about that, Tony. Go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
Regarding Baker, I'd like to see Baker Lake open on July 6th. We need to get on those fish ASAP. I'd like to see the limit of 6 again. Those fish are bright the first 2-3 weeks of July, and the meat quality is a lot better. So I'd like to see that happen. Also, I'd like to see a hatchery Chinook open on the Nooksack River, all the way up from the Slater Bridge, all the way up to Kendall Creek Hatchery for Hatchery Chinook. You have surplus coming back. And also, we've got some big issues and maybe talked about on the Nooksack Chums. Last year, your hatchery did not receive escapement again. This has been going on and on for years. The tribes went in there 5 days a week, and it affected the hatchery stock and the wild stock. So I would like to see, especially the Lummi tribe, get cut back on their tribal days on their chum season with low numbers again this year. And those are my 3 comments.
Thank you, Tony.
Yeah, my name's Philip. I've seen Pat's proposal for this year's fisheries. I couldn't co-sign on that more. If we could get that bought off, that would be absolutely phenomenal. So I have quite a few questions, but I'm going to group them up into a couple of them into one statement to hopefully make the time go faster. So thank you for providing all this information. It's encouraging to see areas of optimism where we could see some of the most time on the water for Chinook in years. I don't necessarily have a question as much as I do have a statement. I'm going to talk about a couple topics here. So the budget cuts we are seeing from the legislator are a tough hand to be dealt. It's really disappointing. Many people in this room and many listening online have spent significant time and even their own money advocating to local legislators to make these cuts and allocations more equitable compared to other programs funded within the state. As the department considers these forecasts and as the department considers how to respond to these unfortunate cuts, I ask that you remember that the effort people in this room and online have already put in. I'm urging you to look for ways to be more efficient and minimize cuts that directly impact the salmon we are discussing today. Our license dollars, our state tax dollars, all fund this entire system. All of us, including the entire department, have spent time away from our families working to earn that money. Please don't make that time we have sacrificed go to waste. These salmon already face enough challenges to survive and to reproduce. Please find ways to ensure that these budget cuts do not make those challenges even harder. As these fish leave our rivers and begin their migration, they face significant predation. I know there's been discussions in the past about programs addressing this, but as we move into forecasting, I ask that we do not lose focus on predation. It is a major visible issue that affects everyone in this room, regardless of how we fish. As these fish start to turn out into the ocean and come back, many migrate through Canadian waters. The main stock that limits our fisheries in Puget Sound year after year is the Stillaguamish Chinook. I talked about this at the first meeting. 55.6% of these fish die in Canadian waters. We've heard discussions about renegotiating the Pacific Salmon Treaty. Today is about forecast. It's about forecast this year, it's about forecast next year, and the years after that. Many of us here have kids who love to fish. Catching a Chinook salmon as a kid just hits different. You remember that fish forever. Our children's future opportunities will depend on how effectively the department advocates for these fish beyond our borders. I've heard Kyle Addicks talk about the PST a bunch. Kyle, I know you know the PST is important. As we move through this forecasting, Kyle, for the sake of our kids and our grandkids, please fight for these fish in these negotiations. As these Chinook and Coho salmon begin returning this year, we are looking at extremely robust numbers we have not seen in a very long time. At times, it feels like we all in this room are divided by how we fish or where we fish, and that can be discouraging. But this year is different for two reasons. The first reason is we have an abundance worth fighting for. Even without a clear public-facing report card on how the current management plan has performed, the writing's on the wall. Everyone in this room knows and understands we have been very conservative. This is the time to stop playing defense and start playing offense. I'm asking the department to push initial model inputs as aggressively as possible right from the beginning. It's time to move the needle. We all need to reap the rewards of being modest and conservative for such a long time. I want to, let's unapologetically celebrate the victory of this massive abundance by pushing the absolute limits of FRAM. Second, and more importantly, there are stakeholders listening to this meeting from halfway around the world. There are people deployed in a war zone in the Middle East, serving this country with honor, commitment, and courage. One of them has reached out to me personally, asking that we do everything we can to maximize the time on the water when he returns home to his family this summer. As a sign of respect and appreciation for those who are serving our countries overseas, I asked the department to put in the extra effort this year to find those additional days, those additional opportunities, and those impacts wherever possible. This is the time to be proactive and not reactive. As these fish move through the Strait of Juan de Fuca, they enter waters that have been clouded in recent years. In the public's eye, this area continues to receive significant impact on how these fish are managed. From the public's perspective, it has exposed some of the darkest sides of fishery management. I'm generally concerned that we have policies that do not fully align with the shared values in this room and beyond. We all say we believe in conservation. We all say we are stewards of the resource. But as these fish pass through the state, these fish pass through the straits, all too often these words are not matched by action. I had productive communication this week with James Dixon from NOAA. James, if you're on this call, thanks for listening. There are important discussions ahead between the department and the co-managers. This is the moment to address the gaps, the loopholes, and the inconsistencies. This is a very pivotal time for the department and the co-managers within these discussions to have some difficult, honest, and transparent communication. Some of these topics aren't pretty. Some of them aren't fun. You've all been put in a position of leadership for a reason. I ask that everyone within this room and beyond become part of the solution and not the problem. Many of us don't have a voice during these closed-door negotiations. We all respect communication between these governments. All eyes and all ears are on everyone within these talks coming up. It's time to make a monumental and historical difference. Make your time serving for your respective governments meaningful and purposeful. It's a tradition and an honor to be selected to be in those talks. I ask that every party involved in signing the loaf this year does not do so until they can confidently say they have done everything in their power to put plans, parameters, and forecasts which uphold conservation. That means not just commitments on paper, but measurable, reliable, in-season management that holds everyone accountable to our common goal. As these salmon enter the Puget Sound, they move into fisheries that many of us deeply value. We've been looking forward to this all winter long. For some stakeholders, this may be their last ride. I've been contacted by someone with a terminal illness who asked me to do everything possible to help them spend as many days as they can on the water fishing with their family during this time they have left. I want to acknowledge the people in this room. Many of you have spent long hours and time away from your families over the last few weeks to get us here. This effort from the department has not gone unnoticed and is truly appreciated. On Monday, I had one of the best conversations I've had with an apartment employee in the 40 years that I've been alive. Jake Rice made a commitment 2 weeks ago and was a man of his word. He took the time to make a call and answered several difficult questions with transparency and professionalism. Jake, I ask you today to take everything I've said to heart and find a way to set the tone for the rest of this process. The speed of the engine is the speed of the train. For everything that I've just talked about, for everyone in this room on this call, and for everyone who will take part in these seasons and many more, and for those who this will be their very last one, please give your team the motivation and the direction to find every opportunity possible, because everyone needs it. Thank you.
Thanks, Philip. I had one thing just on the budget. I know that's been a big concern of a lot of people. Our executive team is at WDFW is digging into that budget, working really hard to make sure that we have the monitoring enforcement to have these fisheries for 2026 season. And we're hopeful to have additional updates throughout this North of Falcon process as these things go on. We realize it's important to people and we're looking at it. We'll look forward to providing updates through the process. So.
Okay, our last hand online for right now is Zachary. Zach, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. Just want to, first of all, echo a lot of what Pat said earlier. But, looking at this, we have a situation where there's a lot of higher abundance in various stocks. But I know that we're staring at the Snohomish as a big problem. And, I understand, or at least I've been told that it's particularly there's this issue of these age 2 fish. And, FRAM is the imperfect model that lets us fish. And as we know, it can have some odd quirks where, adjacent marine areas may have very different stock compositions, at the same time, and other things that sometimes help us, sometimes hurt us. But I think this year in particular, it's super important to use those Snohomish impacts as efficiently as possible. And to make sure that in our initial model runs that we've, included a broad enough range of fisheries so we can understand, which marine areas and which time steps will be most efficient. I don't know if it's particularly different, for these age 2 fish or not, but it's important to sort of have this understanding so we can see where are we, which fisheries are really hurting us and what maybe creative options do we have to make the most out of the Snohomish effects we have. I know in the past, for example, Marine Area 9 in the summer has a far lower Snohomish impact than Area 10 summer, but correspondingly typically had a higher Stilly impact. But if we're going to be constrained by Snohomish, shifting that quota northward from 10 to 9 would be a great way, if it turns out in the modeling that is more efficient to, get the most out of our quota. And, making the run from the population centers in Area 10 up to Area 9 is a lot easier than some of the other moving across marine areas that you see. I also think creativity wise, a few years back, and maybe I'm wrong here, but there was a age 2 Stillaguamish issue, and there was a proposal to raise the minimum size to get around that. And that didn't go anywhere because I recall that was in Area 7 and there was some orca concerns about only removing larger fish. But if there's room for creativity, maybe in your, inner Puget Sound areas, sort of whatever it takes, in addition to the generally supportive of Pat's proposals to just model these more reasonable historical fisheries instead of just the recent, severe cuts, room for considering these more creative options to do whatever we can to mitigate the Snohomish problem to make sure that we're stretching these impacts as far as they go. Yeah, I guess last thing would be, I know Pat talked to some folks in the department. Is there anyone in particular I should reach out to sort of understand this Snohomish and particularly this whole age 2 fish thing?
Zach, could you repeat that question? We had trouble hearing the question. I think it was on the Snohomish H2 comp stuff, but didn't quite hear the question.
Yeah, sorry. So is there anyone in particular, let's see. All right. Is there anyone in particular I should reach out to the department to understand this whole age 2 Snohomish thing? I know that's just, I don't totally have a grasp on how the FRAM is interpreting the different age classes of those fish and how those inputs come in.
Hang on 1 second, Zach.
This is Ty Garber from the FRAM unit. So the forecasts are given to us in different ages. So you have the 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, and very few 5-year-olds. The forest came in with lower abundances on the 3s, 4s, and 5s. And that's what you're seeing as a constraint on the Snohomish. It came in with about 50% higher on the Snohomish natural 2-year-old. So when we run FRAM backwards and it puts those fish in the ocean as abundances, they come back when you run FRAM forward, and they're picked up in all our fisheries. And since the sport fisheries hit sublegal fish, you're mostly seeing those in our sport fisheries. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. So those are those age 2 fish modeled like spatially differently than the age 3 and the age 4 class fish, or are they sort of assumed to be in the same areas and the same ratios?
They're modeled differently.
Okay.
There's 2-year-old exploitation rates in the base period.
All right. Thank you, Ty.
Thanks, Zach. Thanks, Ty. Back to question in the room. We got one down in front here.
Hello, everyone. This is Alex Van Hine. I am a Marine Area 7 advocate, Fish Northwest, fishnorthwest.org. Something we haven't talked about in quite a few years is our 8-1 and 8-2 winter Chinook opportunity. I was hoping that maybe there could be some light or some information shared on, one, why that was taken away in the first place, what factors went into taking that away. I think there's folks in the public that don't understand what went into removing that fishery. And then secondly, what's been done to re-implement it? Has it ever been modeled since? Has it ever been something that we've included on the modeling tool? I don't recall seeing that ever listed. So I was hoping that we might be able to touch on what's preventing that fishery from returning.
Do you have any specific years in mind in terms of when we saw those initial changes, or from a historical perspective, just overall? And I only ask that from being what, year and a half in, that I may not have the historical perspective you're looking for that answer.
I believe the fishery went away in 2020 or 2019.
I wouldn't be able to answer that with my short research, but I will look into that and get.
Is there anyone in the room that has any context on that fishery, that why it went away? Ty, do you have any recollection of that fishery? No, it's okay if you don't.
Yes. So I wasn't in the FRAM unit in 2020. And I would group that along with all the other winter fisheries with the base period changes, right? So I would assume that it is still Squamish impacts in that winter fishery, just like it was everywhere else. So it's, give a proposal for it. We could look at it and see what it does, but I'd imagine it would be pretty heavy on still Squamish.
Again, any ideas and proposals, we're certainly happy to take it and then can work those into modeling tools.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Ty. I'll talk with some folks and I'll see if we can come up with some numbers and maybe we can get something put in just to at least see. And I think it would help me to discuss that in the public. It's a question that comes up a lot, and for us to be able to give an answer in defense of why the department's doing it, and it might clear some things up. So we'll look and see if we can give you guys something to potentially model. Thank you.
If you can get us some ideas from proposal, I'll look into the historical aspects of the question. Yep. Thanks, Alex.
Okay, our next hand online is Brian. Brian, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, we got you.
Okay, Brian Stone with the Puget Sound Advisory Group. I'd like to voice my support for the July beach coho fishing proposal. So, prior to the regulation change in 2024, we had 19 days of July coho and pink fishing in 2023. Since then, we've had 2 to 3 days per year. So provided that MA9 opens on July 16th this year, this would provide 16 days of opportunity. And I'd like to see that take place. This proposal would have minimal impacts on Chinook. Also, a previous caller mentioned 8-2 beach fishing. And the bait box on Whidbey is one of the few places left on the sound where you can still get fresh herring. We want to keep these businesses viable. So since that's so close to 9, you could look at a limited area there for having a July beach fishing. And then just one last comment to the general public. Please consider filling out voluntary trip reports after your trips this summer. We need as much data as possible. Thank you for your time today and for your efforts. Have a great day.
Thank you, Brian.
Hello, this is Kerry Hoffman. I'm with the Washington State Guides Association, and I just kind of want to advocate for the freshwater community. I agree with a lot of stuff Pat said earlier as well. But mainly the Skycomish River summer Chinook fishery. It's essential to many local businesses and guides in the area, and it supports a robust recreational fishing opportunity. So I'd really like to prioritize an in-river fishery in June and July. In order to target the large hatchery production. I believe it's 9,740 hatchery fish returning back to the Wallace this year. It's a clean and direct fishery, and I also think it would be beneficial to attempt to create a clear distinction between stocks, between the Skycomish summer Chinook and the Snoqualmie Basin fall Chinook. One potential avenue I thought about exploring will be looking at the Columbia River Regional Management Plan and how they separate spring and summer stocks with the calendar date. And I would encourage the department to explore similar alternatives in order to make that happen. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Gary.
Okay, our next hand online is from Kurt. Kurt, go ahead.
Yeah, as always, I'm confused. And I want to talk a little bit about Stilgwamish Chinook. When I look at the coded wire tag information, you know, the white horse fish were referred to as spring Chinook. When I read about Stilgwamish, North Fork Stilgwamish Chinook in co-manager's harvest management plan, they're referred to as summer Chinook. Yet when I look at the modeling we do in North of Falcon, they're forecast and modeled as if they're fall Chinook. What little bit I know about the Chinook is that they're probably summer Chinooks. And it makes me wonder whether we're using the appropriate time step to monitor the impacts on the adult summer Chinook's head for the Stilgwamish. I suspect the vast majority of those fish are in the river or at the mouth of the river prior to the July 16th openers. If indeed that was the case, then we're primarily catching subadult fish, which would have a different adult equivalency than catching those adult fish. Now, it gets confusing because the South Fork Stilgwamish fish are in fact true fall Chinook. And the same thing happens on the Snohomish. The Skycomish fish were considered summer fish. And those fish are in the river. Some of those fish are in the river in early June through June. Again, in the river long before the traditional or the current summer Chinook fisheries start. The Snoqualmie portion of it are a late fall Chinook stock. It seems to me if we recognize those biological differences, there might be some shaping that could be done in the modeling, but it would have to be first considered and move forward. I've raised this issue, I don't know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and I still think it's valid and something that might be considered to give some flexibility to what we go on. Moving on, I looked at the forecast this year, and while I initially was very encouraged to see that the Stilgwamish population was slightly more robust than in the past,
For the Still-Squamish, that's good news. But I look at the Still-Squamish increase related to the total forecast for Puget Sound Chinook. It looks like to me that per 1,000 encounters in the fishery, the recreational fishery, the portion of Still-Squamish fish will be slightly higher. That is not good news. Hopefully I'm wrong, and I guess the first model run that we get will provide more insight to that. And I'm a little disappointed that we don't have a better model run. Once again, at best, we'll have something to work off of on the North of Falcon 2. And someone mentioned the concern of the orcas, the size of the Chinook for orcas. You know, rather than what fish we're catching in the river, you know, with the hatchery fish, we might really want to consider whether it's wise to continue to use all the jacks in our brood stocks that we currently use. My understanding is that at the hatchery racks, they spawn the fish at random, i.e., they're used at the proportion that they show up in the hatchery rack. If 10% of the fish are age X, then 10% of those fish are used in the spawning population. Unfortunately, the Chinook have gotten so small, and the jacks in particular have gotten smaller, that a large percentage, probably 85 or 90% of the adult mature jacks returning to Puget Sound are less than 22 inches. So we get a disproportionate portion of the hatchery escapements are jacks. And if we continue that into the brood stock, then we're perpetuating the population getting younger and smaller. I don't think that's good for the orcas, and it certainly isn't what I look for in my Chinook fisheries. And those are my biggies for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Kurt. Back to the room. If nobody right now, we can go back online. Oh, Philip again.
Jake, you and I talked about the Still-Squamish payback provisions on Monday. With the accounting for 23 to 24 season, which would have come from publications made in 2025. It's my understanding that we've been managing the Still-Squamish payback provisions for 2 years prior to that. When can we get the accounting for the 2 prior years? So that's probably already done.
I'm not sure where we'd find that, but I'm happy to look into that and get back to you, though. Again, prior to my time here, not sure if what you're looking for, if that's actually documented in the way you're looking for, but I can certainly look into that and get back to you, though.
Yeah, I'm looking for the accounting part of it. We asked at the forecast meeting, and the implementation of it's inside the loaf, but I'm looking for directly, has anybody busted through the numbers that would equate to a Still-Squamish payback, not necessarily in the current timestamp, but the 2 years prior. Do we know that information?
Again, I'd have to look into that prior to my time here, but I can look into that.
Ty, do you know by any chance?
We've announced multiple times in pre-seasons that we didn't go over on Chinook for Still-Squamish.
Do we know by how much? Do we know what the percentages are, or the actual accounting behind that is?
I don't have it on my computer.
Again, not something we would have today, but if we're looking for that, it's something we can look into, see if we have that available. But certainly not for this meeting. We don't have that.
Perfect. Thanks, Jake.
Yep, no problem.
Okay, I'm gonna go to Rob Larson. Rob, I think you've been having an issue raising your hand. You want to unmute?
Thank you, Leah. I was having some tough technical difficulties. I thought it was *9 to raise my hand, but I don't know if that was wrong or not. Can you hear me?
Yeah, that usually works. I'm not sure. There's been some weird technical issues happening today.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and thank Mike for helping get the message to you. Appreciate what everybody does with North of Falcon. I know how much work it is. I have a number of things, a few things that I want to mention. One, I have a desire to keep the 6 fish limit up at Baker Lake. I realized last year there was a lot of people that were there, but I think that there were multiple reasons. First of all, it was the highest forecast run that we had ever had. Second of all, there were more fish in the lake before the fishery opened than we had ever had. And third, we did have a 6 fish limit. But I don't think that that by itself was what caused the dramatic increase in traffic. The other thing that we had that we were dealing with was the fishing on the Snake River was very limited, and a number of the people that guided ended up coming to Baker. So there were multiple things that affects the pressure at Baker, and I would like us to have the opportunity to catch as many of the harvestable fish as possible because we have very low production out of the ones that are left in the lake. The second thing I'd like to talk about, and we've talked about it for a couple of years, and that is an opportunity to fish in Lake Washington on the king salmon that are in there. If there's a way to craft that this year, I have had other people bring that up to me, and I told them that I would share that at North of Falcon. Uh, Probably one of my biggest concerns, we've been shut down for impacts on juveniles in Area 11. I heard that they were increasing the buffer in some areas. I know that under Derek Dapp, when he was modeling, we had an increase in juveniles, and we didn't have a problem catching our fish that were in our quota that year. And I would really like to see us do whatever we can to get back to that. And I think Ty's probably working on that, but we need to do that. I also want to make sure that we have enough fish available if we do get to our quota on impacts, that we can still continue to fish on silver salmon after we reach our quota. Uh, Another thing that would take almost no impact would be to open Area 13 for chum salmon. It's already open for kings during that time, and we have a lot of chums in Area 13. And I did get the records pulled from the number of fish that we were impacting in Area 13, and they're primarily from shore fisheries. And from Area 11 because we're not allowed to fish from a boat and retain chum, and I would like that to be considered. I figured it would take like 0.5% from the numbers that I crunched to allow that fishery. And the last thing that I have is it would be really nice if the opening in Area 13, whether it is from a boat or from shore for chum, if that could be determined ahead of time and announced earlier. I think the Squaxin tribe, it usually kind of corresponds with them, but if we could work with them and get that a set date each year, that would be really helpful. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
We got Pat.
Thank you, Pat Patillo. There are quite a few issues that come up in this forum that I classify as long-term issues. And in my previous microphone experience, I suggested that we should really focus on the proposals for fisheries, and I think for the most part we've done that. But nevertheless, there are important issues that could affect what we propose that I still think are long-term issues. So I want to address just maybe a suggestion about how we treat those long-term issues versus the immediate priority issues about fisheries. I suggest we build a list of issues with the department, of course, or really it's the department that we would hope could make this list. And it would be things possibly such as, I think this is a good example, the total mortality issue that had been addressed at the forecast, and I very much appreciate the department's effort there. I don't think it's going to go anywhere in this North of Falcon process, but it's one that the public has an interest in, encourages you to continue to work on that. And it seems like it's an issue for the kind of off season, which is really our fishing season. But in that time that's not North of Falcon, that's your opportunity to engage with us for issues that are not immediate for the decision, the annual decisions. And they are ones that probably take more time to consider, develop, and it might be that it's one of the reasons why it takes more deliberation is because we know that you need to work with the tribes to be successful at those endeavors. It could also be something that in that category could be what Philip was talking about the Stillaguamish payback. It's a little bit different because it is the description of there's a commitment in the management plan to develop the details of that. And the details have come out in the list of agreed fisheries annually. And we haven't had a chance, we, the public, with our interest in both conservation, of course, and fisheries effects. Payback is one that really incorporates both conservation. I mean, it's called the Stillaguamish conservation payback, and for good reason. And we want to understand that as best we can because we know it has some serious implications on our fisheries. I think for this year, we are concluding that because we have not heard from the department that there will be a payback affecting the design of our fisheries this year, that the state and the tribes, the co-managing state and the tribes, have concluded that there will be no payback. I hope we can assume that we're not going to be surprised at the next meeting that, we forgot to build the payback into things and it's not looking good, whatever. It's a longer term issue, but it's going to be written up in the list of agreed fisheries like it was last year. And we have an interest in understanding that document. We should understand it. I guess we respectfully are requesting that we can discuss that during North of Falcon, what is going into the list of agreed fisheries with respect to the Stillaguamish payback mechanisms, the features that might affect us in the future. So I guess that one is like an overlap, right? It's one that could affect us this year, but we're assuming that it's not. And so we want to set ourselves up for understanding it for the future. And I think some of us that like the numbers that are important to the process of decision making, we're keen on understanding just how those estimates work. And I think that would really help for the credibility of that. I mean, we're assuming, we have a lot of faith in the department that when you are negotiating plans and developing the stuff I mean, we're supporting you to be great negotiators and on our behalf, of course, because we can't be there. So please think about what I've said there, an opportunity to work on some things maybe during this process, but not to distract from our immediate high priority need to get the seasons that addressed and fairly considered, but also to build this list of topics that we could work on with you in the off season. Thank
Thanks, Pat.
Okay, our next hand online is Patrick. Patrick, go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to talk about a little bit of there was a question about the history of fishing, winter Chinook fishing, blackmouth fishing in 8.1 and 8.2 when it got closed down. I clearly remember fishing. I launched my boat at Camano Island State Park. It was probably March 1st of 2020, and it was right before COVID. And the reason why that I bring that up is that it's in my memory, 8.1, 8.2, 7 were open prior to COVID for long periods of time. I mean, there's some historical reference and data on how many days specifically a lot of people wanted to fish Area 7, and that it's gone down to the last couple of years, I think 5 days of Chinook fishing, and that's only in the summer. And prior to that, prior to COVID, it was open for months at a time. I know it was open in the summer for at least a month in July 1st on. And in the wintertime, it was open pretty much all winter. So looking at those graphs of the Chinook on your, just going to look on my iPad here on the Puget Sound Chinook forecast and abundance trends. If we look at those bar graphs prior to 2020 when COVID hit, those numbers were up and down, but we did have a lot of fishing in 8.1 and 8.2 in the wintertime, Area 9 as well, and 10. And some of those numbers weren't very high. And looking at the numbers, those graphs after COVID, after 2020, we were basically shut down. And it seemed like it coincided with, I don't know if it coincided with the publication and adoption of the Puget Sound Chinook Management Plan. But ever since after COVID came and then went, we've been in this every year cycle of encounters in Puget Sound. So many encounters of clipped, so many encounters of unclipped, so many encounters of legal size, encounters of sublegals. And those numbers, basically, that's why we only have a season of 3 to 4 days in areas 7 and 9. 10 has a few more days, but the encounters are really shutting us down. And when we see that there's a lot of hatchery Chinook available, we cannot access those because of the encounter. I don't know if it's a model, but it's the encounter way of doing business with the test fishery boats out there and all the data gathering. We cannot access the hatchery Chinook that are available and have been raised for recreational fishers to harvest. That, in my opinion, that needs to change. That whole encounter deal, because it's really hurting us, and it shouldn't hurt us. Hatchery Chinook are for us to harvest. I don't see a value of excess hatchery Chinook in a river where they're not in good shape to catch at and eat. They just go to the hatchery and then they're turned into dog food or whatever. I think everybody agrees that getting a nice bright Chinook is the best way to harvest them and enjoy them. And so I'd really like to see us go back and look at those historical seasons. They're not that hard to look at in the past, and let us access those hatchery Chinook with more opportunity and more days on the water in the summertime, and also in the wintertime. Wintertime Chinook fishing is wonderful. I mean, it's just one of the best experiences. It's less crowded, and I believe that we can do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. In front.
Thanks again, Alex Van Hine here. I'm going to briefly, because I had already set something aside here to make some mentioning on Stilly Payback before Pat eloquently made his point there. I reviewed the loaf after we were reminded that the details of that provision are within that, and I did see that it outlines a very specific timeline for calculations to be completed on that provision to be by February 7th. So my question is, has the assessment and calculation, has that been completed? Was that completed by February 7th this year?
I would have to ask our technical team, but I do know that those conversations we have with the co-managers coming up to understand those calculations and make sure we're on the same page. So I'm not aware of those conversations having yet. So
you took it right from me. So I wholeheartedly believe that the level of communication between the department and co-managers is generally strong and cohesive. It must be, especially with the complexity that is co-management. But with that said, today is March 18th. And if we still have not had a discussion based on a calculation that is in loaf described to have taken place by February 7th, then I would say that's something that we should probably address because it is pertinent. We have not seen any publicly available review, and for any year since, it's indoctrination into our fisheries. So this is a highly powerful provision, and it's an extremely pertinent in shaping and managing our fisheries, but it has the potential to show exactly where we stand. And it has the potential to even show the results that the department's done an admirable job of managing our fisheries to the highest level of availabilities. But it also might show that maybe we've been overly aggressive in our season shaping and our fishery control implementation in lieu of the threat of not exceeding that payback provision. So I want to just quickly note on that. So thanks. Marine Area 7 would love to see for our summer Chinook seasons be increased in our upcoming model season. Looking back to some recent years of something that's comparable, I believe in 2023 we saw a forecast for our fall Still-Guamish at 1,214 fish total, which is still shy of what we're seeing in this favorable forecast this year. So for the season, for that 2023 season, we implemented a 2,100 fish quota. I would say we can even exceed that in our first model run of what we proposed, to at least try to get us at minimum to that threshold of where we were coming out of this process in 2023, which was at a 2,100 fish quota. So that would be my actual input on what we could model with the Marine Area 7 Chinook fishery. VTRs were mentioned real brief earlier. I know that we talked about that in detail in the last meeting. So since then, it's been made aware to me with some conversations with various folks that there might be still some misconception on the importance of VTRs and how they might help not only shape our seasons, but how they could help the department with being provided an accurate data set of what's occurring in our fisheries. I've heard some rumblings that there even is some department pushback on what the value of STRs would be, and even maybe within our advisory group on the value of what STRs and VTRs might be. So I want to possibly give another opportunity for the department to really make a case for why they are of value to us as recreational constituencies, what they can actually do for our fisheries. I understand they're not used for in-season management, but really make that case and help us educate the public on why we should use them, and if not, then maybe highlight what they can be used against us, or if at all. So just really hoping the department can clear that up, so that we can gain some traction on this and maybe put some things to bed on if they're beneficial or they're not. Thank you.
Yeah, so maybe I'll look if our technical staff want to add in. We talked about this a little bit during the forecast meeting. I think Ty gave an update on VTRs and that importance. Unsure, I think you made a comment that you had heard from staff that's unsure of the importance of VTRs, or maybe okay, I just want to make sure. I do know that since our first forecast meeting, we had a number of different thoughts and ideas on how we can expand that. And so we are working internally on how we can better inform and promote those VTRs as well, not only through our larger communications, but also like on the docks and in the field with our staff as well. So we are looking at different options and what we can do and how we make that information more readily available, but also promoting that as well. So we are continuing to work on that. Ty, do you want to give a brief real quick? Again, we'll try to stay focused on the proposals. We talked about this in last forecast meeting, and we're continuing to work on education materials.
Yeah, so I would say turning in the VTR is probably the most powerful thing you could do as a sport fisherman in Puget Sound. So the way it works is there's areas where there are no test boats, like 12 and 13. Those areas are completely represented by VTRs or angular reporting. Where there's a test boat, we prioritize test boats, and this goes back to the original methodology of the prioritization of different data sets and the qualities from the inception of park selective fisheries. So if we were to have a test boat that didn't make sample size for a fishery, we would look into the VTRs to use those for the estimates in the postseason, right? Or if that wasn't sample size, would look at, we test charter VTRs versus regular private English VTRs, but that's how they're used. And it's mostly in the postseason now. Does that answer your question, Alex?
Okay, our next hand online is from Tom. Tom, go ahead.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining today, and thanks for the department staff for all your hard work. I wanted to talk about one proposal, but I also, as a salmon fishing advisor, wanted to kind of reply to Patrick Walker's comments. One of the things that we're doing here is trying to restore natural Chinook populations. Okay, they're ESA listed, and we could actually have all of our fishing shut down if we aren't taking active steps to try to rebuild wild Chinook populations. So the reason that we have the modeling and the reason that we monitor different things about our fishing is to allow us to actually access those hatchery fish while proving to the federal government that we're not impacting wild fish. So there's a method to the madness, and I agree with you. I wish we could fish every day, all day in the winter, etc. But we're trying to restore natural runs. That being said, I wanted to kind of foot stomp on the Lake Washington Chinook proposal for Labor Day. I know Dan Stoffer, my buddy's not here today. He's got to work. That is a fishery that has no outside impacts other than the fish that are already in the lake. So it doesn't impact Stillaguamish, doesn't impact Snohomish. There's been a surplus of hatchery Chinook in Lake Washington for the last few years. And so I think that's a fishery that makes a lot of sense. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Go back to the room.
You know, to add to Pat's list, he just discussed, forecasting now is about forecasting now, but it's also about preserving these fish in the future. When I walked in, I think I saw the Stillaguamish tribe fish bio here. I'm concerned about the over exploitation of that stock, as he probably is as well. Stakeholders here have a vested interest of everything inside the Stillaguamish payback provisions, especially those outside of sport fisheries. The LOAF has specific verbiage which describes the importance of in-season management and the accountability of the impacts on the Stillaguamish Chinook. I've read the entire LOAF for the last 5 years, and being new here, I was concerned to see that there are fisheries being conducted in areas 5 through 13 without any controls. These concerns are highlighted in at least one recent example of a fishery inside of the Strait of Juan de Fuca that actually harvested over 10,200 Chinook compared to a Fram projected catch of 3,200. This is 3 times the preseason projection, and the additional impacts to the Stillaguamish AEQs are absolutely through the roof. If you look at the Puget Sound Chinook Harvest Management Plan annual reports for the last few years, you can see many other examples of this. If you take the inputs placed into the LOAF on the recreational side in that same timestamp, these fisheries have been managed to never exceed those quotas. Public perception on these massive overharvests show lack of accountability. I would ask that everyone who puts inputs into the LOAF improve their commitments to conservation by managing in season.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go to the next hand online. Henri, go ahead. You can unmute.
Hi, this is Hank Vanderheg from Bellingham Puget Sound Anglers. Looking at the proposals for additional opportunity, I think you really need to consider everything that you can for Area 7. I know you're stuck with the modeling that you have, but I don't think it appropriately takes into account the restrictions that the Canadians have been putting on their seasons the last at least 5 or 6 years. They've been shutting down all of their Chinook fishing basically from Victoria up through Vancouver, April through August. And I think that your modeling might be based off of seasons from 10 years ago. Between that and the substantial increases of returns to the Samish hatchery and the Nooksack, I mean, there are a lot of hatchery fish out here, and we do not get much of an opportunity, for those hatchery Chinook, other than a few days. So, in the proposals, there was a increased quota in 7, 9, 10, 11. I think 7, with especially considering the Samish returns, it really should be considered for an increased quota. If that's not available because of the modeling, well, then let's look at that Bellingham Bay fishery as a terminal area that's probably considered differently. I really think that first part of August proposal is a good one. It's a small area. It's close to Bellingham. It's a great opportunity for people from Anacortes through Bellingham, and there's, like I said, there's a ton of fish going to that Samish, and there's a lot of commercial activity there. If they're getting, I'm sure they're probably advocating for increased opportunity, and if they're going to get some increased opportunity, we should as well. We've seen increase in the daily limits there But that's, that it's difficult for, a guy with, a couple rods and a couple hooks to, catch, 4 snook per person per day. It's a little bit, better for the public to have that extra couple of weeks in August, to give us more opportunity on those hatchery Chinook. So that's, I'd really advocate for, some increased opportunity in 7. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Carl in the room.
Earlier, I had asked about how we run our initial model run based on last year's fisheries. And you had told me that we had run, that the tribal inputs were based on last year's fisheries. And I have to wonder if it was fisheries that were actually prosecuted and to what level. And this goes to what Philip was just talking about. And I believe he was referring to the macaw winter troll fishery. And this is an issue that is pretty big. We're talking about accurate reporting of I know that the tribes report their fisheries accurately, but we're talking about accuracy of how we propose fisheries, how accurately the fisheries are proposed and how they are prosecuted. The placeholders for fisheries, the macaw fishery has just been all over the map. Now we're getting it in an inverted place where they're modeling 2,800 fish or whatever it is, and then harvesting 9 or 10,000. And, we were previously modeling 6,000 and they only harvest 2,500, and then at the last minute they'd lower their model down to 2,500. These types of games are just unfair to the process. We are asked to micromanage every aspect of our recreational fisheries, of all of our non-tribal fisheries, and have intensive monitoring programs. Where's the equality in this? I mean, how are we getting the co-managers to show that they will take the same steps to account their fisheries through this process? I just don't get it. I mean, how can we be forced to measure our fisheries so precisely, and then we have fisheries that are proposed that we don't even know if they're going to actually conduct those fisheries and to what level they will be conducted? Some of them, they don't fish at all. Some of them, they fish at 3 times the level that were proposed. And I absolutely think that there should be in-season management on any fisheries that are liable to run over these intensive ESA conservation objectives. Thank you.
I have a hand on line from Rob, I believe. Rob, you can unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we got you.
Okay. Yeah, the only other thing I wanted to comment again was that fishery on the Skycomb mission. Some of the comments that I heard another caller make, I think it was Carrie Hoffman, and I do agree if there's a way that we can manage that fishery looking at run timing similar to some of the things on the Columbia. Any way that we can get access to those hatchery fish that are really valuable for sport fishermen and that we've paid a lot of money to create would be a wonderful thing. And I know there's some challenges with that, but I think we should look at any possibility to make it a better situation. With a new 10-year management plan kind of hurt us with some of the numbers that were in there from previous years. And we just need to look at ways to be able to harvest those fish that were created to be harvested. Thank you.
Thank you. Go to the room again.
Thanks again, Alex Van Hine. If we're just taking tallies of what we're advocating for, throw a check mark into extending Bellingham Bay fisheries into August, throw a check mark into increased quota in Area 7, a check mark into non-selective coho fishing in Area 7 for the entire month of September, and also a check mark in extending 8-1's coho into the end of October, non-select. I think those are all wonderful ideas that we've seen in the past. I think the abundances would allow for that to happen this year. There's often in these meetings, there's a comment or two that occurs when we start levying where opportunity in some areas or opportunity removed from some areas can equal increased opportunity in others. And I do understand that line of thought. I've been doing this long enough. I can see where the impacts lie. I can see where they're more expensive than others. And I do value overall as an entire recreational constituency from marine areas 5 through 13. I value days on the water for everyone. But I'm very cautious of going down this approach of looking at any particular area and saying that opportunity in that area is less valuable than having opportunity in another area that will already see a drastic increase of days on the water just as is than we would see in another. And the very last thing I want to do is to find us in a situation where we're being divided on an area versus area. But I just would like to reiterate that there are some areas that have been more affected on reduction in days on water than any other areas in Puget Sound. I think we all know where those are, and we think we all know where my allegiances lie. So I just kind of wanted to make a comment on that methodology or that train of thought always worries me, to leverage what areas opportunity or day on the water is more valuable than another. A quick modeling question as we look at proposals, is it fair to assume that we would see an increase in our encounter fishery control or our sublegal encounter fishery control in Marine Area 7 this year? I think we were somewhere around 2,000 last year. Haley, I don't know if anyone might pull that up definitively, but is it fair to say or to think that we might see that number increase this year in Marine Area 7?
I'd look to any of our technical staff, maybe Ty.
I could pull it up and give you a real answer if I had internet, but just with the averages, right? So your 6-year running average, your sublegals were higher than expected than FRAM last year, so that average is going to go up. I would expect a little bit of a bump in your sublegals in the modeling for the summer fishery.
Cool. That's kind of how I understood it too. Thanks, Ty. And last thing, I'll hand this back to Lyle here. He's toting the load here with the microphone. our monitoring and our sampling and our test fishing. I just wanted to briefly talk. I know I mentioned this. Can I get any sort of confirmation or any affirmation that there is some type of SOP being implemented into our Marine Area 7 sampling and estimating, where we will have some form of SOP that mandates, like our aerial survey teams are communicating to our actual test fishing teams? And I know I brought this scenario up during the forecast meeting, but I think it would go a long ways to provide some confidence in the public that we could say, okay, our aerial survey team is up there. They've identified where the bulk of the fleet is. They're going to communicate that to our test fishing boats on the water. And then that it would be a more accurate representation of the fishery if we could ensure that those test boats are constantly where the bulk of that fleet is.
We are working on any alternative strategies we can have to try to improve that. I would say Marine Area 7 is a very large area, and depending on who I talk to each day, they're going to say, well, the test fishing boat was either in the right area or the wrong area. But we are looking into ways that we can better communicate that and ensure that, I think we saw the heat map from last year, and we can put that up in one of these future meetings if we want to show as well that we are, taking feedback from where the public is, and whether we have like a real time, this is where the flight is, we're working on exploring what's possible and with our sampling methods. So.
Sure. Thank you.
So just a heads up, we're approaching the noon hour. I know everybody's been here very long. Maybe we'll take a couple more questions. If that works, maybe one more online. If not online, we'll go one more in the room. Okay, we'll go one or two more. I'll do two more in the room then. I think I saw Philip and Pat.
Well, thank you. I think the biggest issue we're going to have, or the department's going to have to start with in developing a reasonable set of fishery seasons that address conservation is the Snohomish issue. I haven't really heard from the department about whether they acknowledge that this is the likelihood is that it's going to really, really, really restrict opportunities for Chinook this year. You can see it if you just look at the changes in the almost all of the fisheries in the ocean in BC. We haven't seen their real proposals yet, but in BC, in Puget Sound, the non-selective fisheries by the tribes, net or troll, ocean sport and commercial, the impacts on Snohomish went down with last year's fisheries in place and with the options in the PFMC that are being considered, they went down. But the 8.3% limit for Snohomish is exceeded by all the fisheries together. It's up at 8.8. So 0.5% of an exploitation rate. Well, just the Marine Area 5 alone went up from 0.8 to 1.4. I mean, it's that and Area 10, summer fisheries. It went up by about 0.2, I think, in Area 10. So we got a big problem with Snohomish. I mean, all of the discussion that we've had here, this is my reality check for people. Just to make sure everybody is seeing there's a very, very big rock in this road. And we're gonna come right up upon it when we leave this meeting. We might as well talk about that it's going to have a big impact right now. And I don't know how you're going to fix it, but you know, the classic alternatives are, do you share the pain, or do you be efficient and cut where the big impacts are? Well, if you cut where the big impacts are, say goodnight, CQ. I mean, it's just going to be a killer. They already lost last year. You're in honor the address of getting a winter fishery. Well, it's not going to help their summer. And if you do proportional, the alternative is proportional. Let's all share the pain, and let's take a little bit of in everybody's area. Well, the impacts are still in those two areas, primarily CQ. And so you could share the pain and cut a whole bunch of fisheries, including freshwater fishery that we've heard a lot of people talk about how valuable that is in for Wallace fish. And it's a great fishery, but boy, there's a lot of great fisheries out there. And so it's going to it's going to make us compete against each other real soon. That's what's set North of Falcon 2, folks, so get ready. And I can't think of any other, we talked about, well, how did this come about? What's the forecast of H2? Where did that come from? It's not the first time this has happened. I remember it happening like 15 years ago. And we were able to fix it, tribe and state together. We came and decided there were some ways we didn't want to so drastically lose fisheries. Well, even those cut fisheries back then are better than the ones we've got now. But still, we came together as the co-managers, and we prevented just tragic outcomes for our fisheries. Nobody wants a community like CQ to suffer. I mean, they're all so dependent on fisheries. And they've sure had a history of getting whacked. So I'm being a little bit hyper in my comments here. I know we all need to be stay calm, but I'm a little bit afraid that if we're going to lose a day or a week or time, that it really needs some creative thinking by the managers. I mean, even, dare I say, to challenge whether or not the 8.3% limit is really the limit for this year. Could there be considered that some sort of special dispensation to get around that 8.3%, because it's really going to hurt this year. And by the way, even at 8.8% in the NELF run, the spawning escapement is higher than it was last year. So I think we need to remember that we have decided and built a management plan, decided to manage for these exploitation rates, because one of the big reasons was because exploitation rates were resilient to the understood uncertainty in forecasts. Now, there's not one forecast that's more uncertain than age 2 fish for Chinook, because there's just not a good database to build that on. So that's my little challenge to you folks. We need to wake up. It's really going to hurt this year. It's not as good as it looks like.
Thanks, Pat. You raised some really good points. And I just wanted to say thank you for helping to try to get folks on the same page about coming to us with what you described, what we already know we're ahead of us, and think about that creatively as well, so that when we go into North of Falcon 2, we have a really good list we've provided today of proposals, and then thinking about what that means moving forward. would be really helpful. Thanks, folks.
Yeah, I just have a comment about, or
Bring the microphone. Oh.
yeah. So you're basing it on the mid option of the ocean. There's major portions of the model that's not in there currently. So you have the Canadian fisheries, you have the Canadian forecast, and you have all the Puget Sound fisheries. So there's a bunch of changes that could happen in the model throughout this process. And also, I get that we're a little bit gun shy about Area 5, especially in the winter last year, because we lost that fishery. That was because of this kind of similar issue you're describing with the age composition. But there were no other impacts in Nooksack Springs to pull from and to share that load, right? So it's not fair to say, oh, we're going to cut Area 5 in the summer or something like that, because Snohomish shows up all across our fisheries. My comment.
Certainly, once we have this first model run, we'll be able to dig deeper and start exploring those options and stuff when everything gets put in the model. So, okay, last question, Philip here in the front.
Are the docks even in an Area 5 yet? I don't even think the docks are in an Area 5. Just kidding. Maybe the docks won't go in this year and it won't be an issue. But I've never been able to catch quality fish at a CQ. On that topic though, with regards to these proposals, we all know how constraining the Still-Squamish and the Nooksack early Chinook are to planning and shaping all these fisheries. I'd like to hear why during this process the agreed fisheries in the loaf are so much different than what actually becomes as an outcome. Last year, we lost Marine Area 5 winter sport fishery, which we're talking about now. I'm really glad to see it's being modeled to be brought back. But long term, why are we allowing projected catch of terminal fisheries impacting that fishery to be 3 times higher than they have ever been? If you look at the 5-year average, they are 4 times higher than they've ever caught. I'm new to this, so forgive me, but I can't see any biological or political reason on why that would ever be justified. As we model this Area 5 fisheries, and we're talking about, these constraints, I'd like to see the department maybe consider with the co-managers invoking that provision in the Puget Sound Chinook management plan, maybe increasing that critical ER ceiling higher than 10.9 on those Nooksack earlies to allow a meaningful fishery here. It's my understanding that that can be done once every 5 years. Maybe just consider it.
Thank you. Okay. Thanks everybody for your time today. Obviously, a lot of work still left to do. Appreciate everybody online for the comments as well. Just a reminder that next Tuesday we have another meeting. I believe it's from 6 to 8 p.m. And any other thoughts, ideas you may have, please reach out to staff and we'll make sure we get those and hopefully more updates soon and have those modeling tools available after this first run for everybody. So thanks for your time and have a great rest of the day.